You know those times that you just feel so frustrated? You've been trying and trying, but the results just aren't coming. Things just aren't going your way. They told me to follow my dreams. They told me to set my own goals and just go out and achieve them. But maybe I'm being unrealistic. I mean, if the people around me aren't doing it, maybe there's a good reason that no one's doing it. Maybe my parents were right. My friends. Maybe those people at parties whose faces go cold when I tell them my plans. Maybe they're all right. Maybe I'm just being too much of a dreamer. Time to get back to reality, I guess. Maybe I'm just not good enough. Maybe I don't deserve it. Frustration happens when we don't get the results we expect in the time that we expect them to happen. Motivational YouTube videos and self-help books make the road to our dreams feel really exciting at first. They give us that initial kick to make the plans and think about how it will all look once we've achieved it. If I just have enough willpower, and if I just choose the right track, then I'll never feel frustrated a day in my life again, right? Unfortunately not. Frustration is and it will always be a part of any journey that we take that extends past the life that we're used to. Often we'll find that once we start bravely walking our chosen path, things can sometimes even become a bit more frustrating. This is because we now know precisely what it is what we're after, and we're less willing to settle for anything less. Frustration is an inherent part of the growing process, and we do need to pass through it. But we don't need to let it smother our fire. We don't need to let it knock us off track, especially if we get better at managing it. So how can we manage this frustration? Well, that's what we're exploring today. Welcome to Redlily Radio. Ira Glass is one of the creators, hosts, and producers of This American Life, which is often cited as one of the top 3 most downloaded podcasts in the whole world. He's been working in radio journalism for a long time, and he's served as an inspiration to many of this current generation's battalion of podcasting journalists. One day, I stumbled across a quote by him that sent shivers down my spine in the best way possible. He was describing the battle that many creatives and many practitioners of any trade face when they start pursuing the field that they've been inspired to follow. He said, and quote,
"Nobody tells people who are beginners," and I really wish somebody had told this to me, is that all of us who do creative work, we get into it, and we get into it because we have good taste. But it's like there's a gap, that for the first couple of years that you're making stuff, what you're making isn't so good, okay? It's not that great. It's trying to be good. It has ambition to be good, but it's not quite that good. But your taste, the thing that got you into the game, your taste is still killer. And your taste is good enough that you can tell that what you're making is kind of a disappointment to you. You know what I mean? A lot of people never get past that phase. A lot of people at that point, they quit. And the thing I would just say to you with all my heart is that most everybody I know who does interesting creative work, they went through a phase of years where they had really good taste. They could tell what they were making wasn't as good as they wanted it to be. They knew it felt short. It didn't have this special thing that we wanted it to have. And the thing I would say to you is do a lot of work. Do a huge volume of work. It takes a while. It's going to take you a while. It's normal to take a while, and you just have to fight your way through that.
Unquote. I've personally found this on every creative project that I've worked on. If you grew up being inspired by music, for example, you might choose now to be a musician yourself. Chances are that you're not going to stop listening to the music that actually inspires you though, and chances are that you aren't able to make music of that same caliber yet. This gap in quality can result in some incredible frustration and demoralization. This is the same for any field. For many people, They give in to this initial demoralization and they give up on the path that inspires them before they have even really begun. What happens when we see a movie that inspires us? Or when we watch a speech that fills us with confidence? There is a great effect that many of these messages can give us, where we switch into this real upbeat, confident attitude. Yeah, I'm gonna do it. I just need to follow my dreams and it will all work out. We get ourselves excited. Maybe we go out and we buy all the equipment that we need and we're ready to get down to it. Let's start making our great art. And so we try, and our results turn out small and probably kind of crap. Oh damn. But in the movies I watched, they just needed a pep talk and then they trained really hard in some jump cut sequence for about 30 seconds and then they were just really good at what they do. Unfortunately, the reality of a long journey is not naturally a sexy one. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. It doesn't easily lend itself to movies and motivational speeches, which is why we don't often see it in these mediums. In reality, it's a patchwork of times of practice, some very engaging times, some frustrating times, those moments where you blaze past your goals and expectations, and those moments where you feel like you've been running through the desert kicking sand for a long time and you're not really getting anywhere. These are all part of the journey. Much of the frustration we feel comes from our expectations not being met. These may be expectations of how good we are, or expectations of how long something will take to complete, or expectations of how many times we will fail along the way, or expectations of how long it will take the world around us to notice, or expectations about how the world will respond when they do notice, or even expectations about how we will feel ourselves once we complete it. It's not that these expectations are bad and that we should let go of them. Though some traditions do suggest this, in my personal experience, I find that doing this can sometimes lead to a rather cynical view of the world and of life. And this cynical view may lead to unhealthy behaviors to fuel or distract from the lack of direction that people are feeling. Having expectations can be important for forming motivation for the goals that we set. What can help with the frustrations that inevitably come is developing the ability to adapt our expectations. If you are making long-term plans, as we do in coaching, then writing these plans down can be especially effective. Now let's take a closer look at this and let me give you a personal example. When we start a path or project, we set expectations either explicitly or possibly unconsciously. Now, because we haven't gone through our specific journey before here, we can only estimate or guess at what it is that we can expect to achieve in what amount of time. We can't predict the future, unfortunately. When I started Redlily coaching, one thing I had to do was a cash flow projection which showed how many sales I was going to make by which specific months. I had to set expectations to be able to plan for the future. And I filled out my cash flow with what I thought was actually quite conservative figures, not making that many sales, not having many clients at first, but it gradually and slowly building up. Now that I'm in the thick of Redlily coaching running as a business, I can share with you that even my conservative estimates were not quite conservative enough. Growth was, and is, slow. Now, while I have always felt like this is a fulfilling path, there have been many points where I've questioned whether I was being realistic in pursuing this or not, especially as no one else I knew personally at the time had done the same thing. There was no real clear path to look to. I was making the first Redlily radio episodes, not knowing if anyone was actually listening to them, and I was extremely frustrated with not having many clients to actually coach. to actually do the work that I set out to do. It was like this for a few months. And then I had a client come out from somewhere that I wasn't expecting, and I finally managed to get a solid practical reminder of why it is that I started this business in the first place. Because I love this work, and I truly believe in its value and place in our world. I still felt frustrated though, because even with this client, things were going so much slower than I had initially planned. I searched for a number of different ways to help me deal with this frustration, but eventually the thing that I found actually worked for me was to go back and adjust my plans to allow for a lot more time and to allow for this slower growth. And almost immediately, when I had this written down in front of me, reflecting this new, slower growth trajectory that was based on the real experience I was having, that frustration seemed to disappear. I had adjusted my expectations, but I hadn't thrown away my goals. I was still on the same path. The difference is that I accepted that it needed more time to hit each milestone along the way. Now, this might not sound instantly motivational like some of the other high-octane videos that you can see on YouTube, but this is the kind of skill that can help you stay on your path in the long run. Do you remember the fable of the hare and the tortoise? If we have one who continuously adapts for slow growth to meet their goals, and we have another who sticks to their expectations and wanting those quick results, but then they get frustrated and they ditch the whole path altogether, which of the two actually reaches their goals in the end? It's so easy for our identity to be wrapped up in our achievements. This is the other part where frustration can become toxic. For that person who got into music because they were inspired by their favorite band or composer, they look at the pieces they are writing and they see that it's not quite the same. It doesn't feel as good. Sometimes they might not even know what it is that their piece is lacking. My art isn't good enough, they say. I've tried it and I just couldn't do it. I'm not good enough. Maybe I can't be a musician, artist, rapper, athlete, designer. Maybe I can't be an architect, doctor, writer, builder. Maybe I can't go to university, start a business, give a public speech, manage people, pass my exams. Maybe I can't get a handle on my anger. Maybe I can't lose weight, gain muscle. Maybe I'm just not that kind of person. Maybe I can't be who it is that I want to be. The trick here is that naturally we take our frustrations personally. As in, we shape our identity by them. And our identity is one of the most powerful driving parts of ourself. It's how we see who we are and who we can be in our world. We can actually practice separating our identity from our achievements. And if we don't take the time to think about this, it actually happens unconsciously anyway. For example, we might say, I'm not a musician until I sell 100 albums. I can't manage people because I've never managed people. I can't go and study because no one in my family has gone and studied. I'm just an angry person. I'm not a fit person. I'm not a muscular person. When we shape our identities based on what we haven't been able to do yet, we are not giving ourselves a chance to grow into the person that we could be. The mindset that we can take that allows us to fail and allows us to grow, this has created one of the most profound shifts in educational understanding in the last few decades. Professor Carol Dweck and her team of researchers spent several decades researching the effects that people's mindsets had on their ability to grow. What they found was that people who believed that their intelligence or their abilities were set in stone, they had what is called a fixed mindset, and they would feel their identity is threatened by the challenges and frustrations that they're presented with in life. Dweck's team tested students in particular and found that the fixed mindset students said they were more likely to cheat to get the results that they wanted. They were more likely to look for other people who did worse than them to compare themselves to so they would feel better about themselves. And they were more likely to run away from difficult challenges rather than face them, rather than learning how to move through them. Now, in contrast, students who adopted what is called a growth mindset, which is the belief that your intelligence and your abilities are not set in stone, but can actually grow through practice and through challenges. These students would show overall higher excitement, higher engagement with the challenges that they were presented with, and they also showed the highest growth in their abilities over the long term. This is Dweck speaking at a TED Talk.
I heard about a high school in Chicago where students had to pass a certain number of courses to graduate, and if they didn't pass a course, they got the grade "not yet." And I thought that was fantastic, because if you get a failing grade, you think, I'm nothing, I'm nowhere. But if you get the grade "not yet," you understand that you're on a learning curve. It gives you a path into the future.
Frustration is a very real part of the journeys that we choose to take. We aren't born with full control over our results. There will be times our expectations will be challenged or dashed, and sometimes this will happen for what feels like time and time again. But there are things that we can do to manage our way through the frustrations that come up, and even feel engaged with them and the growth that they offer us. By getting better at adapting our long-term plans to cater for frustrations that come up, by getting better at separating the results we get from our value or identity as a person, and by recognizing that with practice and time, we will grow. Eventually, we can meet and even surpass our expectations of who we were and who we are. Redlily Radio is produced as part of Redlily Coaching, where we leverage one-on-one coaching, technologies, and this podcast to help grow your personal direction and empower your life in our increasingly technological world. For more information, visit www.redlilycoaching.com.